All right, welcome back into another episode of the Pit, your Georgia regional sports show brought to you by Gray Media. And we are here. I'm Drew Pavon here at WTVM in Columbus, Georgia, joined by Ryan Kelly down in Tallahassee, Florida. Covers a little bit of that South Georgia region. Of course, Joseph Doring out in Augusta, Georgia, and joined by James Irvin down in WLB, Albany, Georgia. Guys, a lot to talk about, a lot going on in the Peach State this past week and a lot this week. Of course, conference baseball tournaments start up, and we happen to have two of the best teams in the entire country when it regards to baseball. And we got to talk Georgia baseball first. They begin the SEC tournament this week. Regular season champs, #1 overall seed. Ryan, I'll start with you. What do you think of Georgia this past weekend over Auburn, going on to the Plains, getting the series win, and looking ahead to the SEC tournament?
All you need to know is Georgia went undefeated in SEC road play this year as far as taking every single road series, which is absolutely unbelievable. In a league as deep, in a league as stacked, and especially with a league as many power arms as the Southeastern Conference has, to go into Plainsman Park against a really good Auburn team that have been playing so well over these last couple weeks after kind of dipping in the middle of the season, you cannot credit UGA enough. First overall seed. I know that RPI is still like hovering around 15, 16 or so, but listen, that doesn't matter when you've won as many league games as this team has in the league that they play in. You take a look at this SEC bracket. First overall, quarterfinals, double bye. You've got Alabama as the potential quarterfinal matchup if you get past Missouri, Ole Miss, or Mississippi State. Mississippi State, I'm sure, would love a little bit of revenge after what UGA did to them at the Dude earlier this season. But overall, Georgia has done so many good things this year. They've earned every last bit of this. And I'm just looking at this bracket, and as a baseball fan, I'm ready to kick my feet up, and I'm ready to watch some SEC baseball this week. Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M is your double byes. It doesn't get much better than that. And of course, when the Dogs are on top of all that, yeah, it certainly doesn't get much better than that in the Peach State.
Absolutely, Ryan. And I saw those bats firsthand Friday night in Auburn. I was there for that game, covering it. Georgia's power is legit, man. Auburn has arguably one of the best pitching rotations in the SEC, and Georgia's powered their way through that second game and were able to get that win in the first game. Joe, what do you think of Georgia leading into Hoover?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal that they're not only coming off the series win against Auburn, but of course getting the double bye ahead of the SEC tournament. Getting a series win and then having a little bit of a lull period with these off days before they actually take the field for the first time in Hoover is a very big deal for momentum, because had they lost that series against Auburn, you're going into the SEC tournament not playing for a couple days, and you don't know what you're going to get on the first day of competition when you've got to step out there on the diamond. So to the credit of what you just talked about, seeing them play down in the Plains, I think that was a huge deal for them to get over Auburn. Ryan, you just talked about it, to be able to dominate their way through the SEC schedule, be the SEC regular season schedule champions. That is just unbelievable that Georgia has been able to continuously sustain this momentum throughout the season, and it's momentum that's only going to obviously help them when they're playing against the other the other teams that are in their same conference that they've already dominated so far this season. And Drew, I wanted to say to your point also about the bats, you don't really anticipate having as good of an offense as Georgia has this season. And with the pitching rotation that Auburn does have and some of these other SEC teams that the Dogs have faced this season, the ability to create runs cannot be understated by Georgia. When their backs are against the wall, they find a way to get across home plate, and that is just so crucial, of course, when you're getting down into these elimination games closer towards the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. And also mentioned Dan Jackson, 2025 season, 6-time, I believe, in NCAA history. That's been able to be achieved. He was a monster, and he's been huge for Georgia all year long, and he'll try to continue that into the SEC tournament. James, the SEC tournament gets weird. You know, those 1 games, and you get that double bye, a lot of days rest. Things could get odd, especially in Hoover. What do you think the Dogs are chances that they can get to that final day on Sunday?
I think if you're the Dogs, I think you got to like your chances that you can make it to the final. But we've seen it where in baseball, you know, that time off can kind of hurt the offense. I mean, you go back to the 2023 Atlanta Braves, they had the best offense in baseball that season, one of the best offenses of all time. But that bye week, that a few extra days rest, it kind of hurt their offense and it hurt the momentum. So I'll be curious to see how the Bulldogs can handle that double bye week and see if they can keep up that momentum. Because while it is great for the pitchers, I mean, that's kind of been the weakness for the Bulldogs this season, a 5 ERA. You hope that the offense, which it has all season, kind of make up for those pitching struggles, but you just kind of hope that double bye week doesn't kill all that momentum that they have built up there, because we've seen it before in baseball where the off time can kind of hurt the bats rather than help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you come to the postseason in baseball, it doesn't matter what level you're at, if it goes to high school, college, or even in the majors, power pitching beats power hitting any day of the week. And when those arms come out in Hoover, you got to watch out. But the Dogs have the power. We know they can do some big things. But, historic teams just an hour down the road, one of probably the best teams in the entire country, Georgia Tech, man, baseball, they are killing it. They destroyed Boston College, a top 25 team, swept them, tied an ACC conference win record, I believe, with 25 wins. I think the total score throughout the weekend was 38-3, which is a Georgia Tech record, and they just demolished BC, and the Golden Eagles had no chance whatsoever. Ryan, what do you think of Tech heading into the ACC tournament?
I think what they did against Boston College is so impressive. This is a team that's been in the top 25, or at least on the fringes of it, almost all season long. And to go out, take care of business the way they do. And I think James Ramsey's pressing the right button here. Remember, this was the ACC regular season champions of a year ago. They go into Charlotte. They don't have into Durham last year. They go in. They don't have the strongest of performances. They end up not as a regional host. They end up as a 2 seed on the road. This is a team that has left no doubt all season long. And now not only do they have a chance, let's face it, with a top 4 national seed, you take a look. Georgia Tech's RPI number 2. They have an insane 19 wins against Quad 1. I take a look at who GT could potentially face in Charlotte this week. Another game against Boston College, UVA. On the other side of the bracket, if you make it to the championship, you're more than likely playing UNC or Florida State. 2 teams that are, of course, amazingly top RPI this year. 2 teams that have a strong case, I should say, for a top 8 national seed. If you go about, take care of your business, if UCLA does not have the best weekend at the Big Ten tournament, who's to say that come selection Monday, Georgia Tech can't have the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament? I'm very anxious to see what they do in that ballpark. If you haven't been to the ACC tournament, if you're a Tech fan, when it's in Charlotte, that's a really cool ballpark there in Uptown. Take a chance, go, have fun, because I'm looking forward to this one just as much as I'm looking forward to the SEC, because these top 4 seeds, I really want to learn a lot more about all 4 of them and where they stand against some of the best in the league heading into regional play.
Yeah, it might be fair to say that, between Tech or UNC, one of those teams might be walking out with the top seed in the entire tournament, with just how everything else falls with Georgia or Auburn or UCLA when it comes down to their conference tournaments as well. Joe, what do you think Tech's chances are walking away with an ACC title here?
I think their chances are unbelievably high. I mean, we've talked about Georgia Tech all season. It seems like every Monday we only talk about them in a good light, and rightfully so, because this team has just barreled through the competition the whole season. You look at the Boston College series, outscoring them 38-3. You take that number ranking out of Boston College right out of their front name, you would have think they played a Division II school, maybe Division III, with how brutal that was for the Boston College team. So Georgia Tech is just simply cruising. I got to think you have to love your chances as a Tech fan to not only get to Saturday, but of course get to Sunday. Now, if they have to play UNC, Florida State, that's when things could get a little tricky, because we're going to see that rest versus rust again, kind of like how we talked about with Georgia. Are you going to be able to perform off of the bye and have those smaller games in front of you against inferior opponents, to say right now, because of how Georgia Tech has beaten opponents this year? Do you have the willpower to get it done this year, get out of Charlotte with a ACC tournament victory, and get back home and host a regional and possibly a super regional? So I think Georgia Tech has immense chances to win the ACC tournament this weekend.
Absolutely. Well, we know they're definitely going to be hosting a regional, but a little supers action on the flats. Would love to see that. James, your thoughts on what Coach Ramsey's been able to do with this program this year, taking over in year 1 and having them potentially at top of the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really impressive the way they've been able to kind of dominate the ACC like that, especially when you consider how many programs and top dominant programs are in the ACC. They've been hitting all the right buttons. They've been killing it. I mean, crushing it offensively. Drew Burris, Kyle Udeze, Alex Hernandez. I mean, they've had incredible seasons. Have been a huge part of why Georgia Tech is where they are. But I think, again, if you're Georgia Tech and you're like the Georgia Bulldogs, you really got to like your chances of getting to Sunday. Georgia's slowly becoming a baseball state, the way the Bulldogs and the Yellow Jackets have kind of been taken over right here. Both #1 seeds in their respective conferences, both have the double byes. Again, though, you just kind of hope to see what will the double bye week look like. Will it be that rest and they'll come out rejuvenated and continue to where their seasons are, or will the rust kind of kick in? We'll see the offensive struggle. Be curious to see how both teams manage the double byes, but I think overall you got to like where you're at, especially if you're the Yellow Jackets. Very, very high opportunity, very high chances to make it to Sunday.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see when you get to these conference tournaments, how are these top seeds, if it's the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, no matter what, like how are you going to deal with the pitching going in these game by games, because each game's going to be different, and sometimes you just got to throw that gameplay completely out the window. But conference tournaments begin this week. We'll have the regionals set by next month, the following week after that. So a lot to look forward to in regards to college baseball. But talking about softball, Georgia getting out of the regional round, sweeping away the weekend, getting onto the super regionals. They're headed to Knoxville. Joe, I'm going to start with you. You were there on Sunday. You covered Georgia and Clemson. What'd you think of the Dogs' performance in that championship game?
I thought it was incredible to be able to go 3-0 throughout the weekend for Georgia and defend home territory on the Athens Regional. They were actually the visiting team yesterday against Clemson, but they didn't play like it. Marissa Miller is only hitting her 3rd home run of the season, but it couldn't have come at a bigger time. She hit it in the top of the 4th, opened up the scoring for the Dogs. They hung around in there. They had a lot of runners left on base in those first 3 innings. So Marissa Miller's home run to kickstart the scoring was definitely extremely beneficial. They scored 2 runs in the next 2 innings for Georgia. Addison Fisher throwing a complete game against Clemson. Just an absolute dominant performance on the mound from her. And we heard Coach Tony Baldwin talk about her performance yesterday. He said the changeup was the biggest difference maker for how she was able to sustain momentum throughout the entire game and be able to close it out without having to have a single player from the bullpen have to come out there for Georgia. So Georgia now going to be going on the road to Knoxville for the Super Regional. We could have seen the Dogs hosting the Super Regional for the first time since 2018, but sadly Tennessee beat Virginia. So the Dogs are heading on the road. I do like their chances with how they performed this past weekend and how they plan to perform here in the coming weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Tennessee always a powerhouse and a very strong softball team, and it's going to be an electric atmosphere in Knoxville. Ryan, what are the expectations for Baldwin's team going into Old Rocky Top to try to walk away and advance on to the World Series?
Well, at this point, you've proven that you absolutely have a puncher's chance against the Vols. I get it's a historic program. I get they're very talented, and I get that's a very, very tough atmosphere. But Georgia just looked so comfortable this weekend after they got past that initial kind of, I don't want to say stage fright, but you're trailing early on through 5 frames against College of Charleston. Sarah Gordon gives you that huge home run to give you the lead. This team, ever since then, completely shut down this weekend's competition. I told you guys that Clemson wasn't necessarily the softball team that they have been over the last couple years. To get that shutout on Sunday in the championship game had to feel really, really good to be as dominant as you were against UNC Greensboro. And by the way, you didn't 3 games. You didn't need a game 7. You didn't need to force through. You didn't need to go through a loser's bracket because something went wrong here or there. The fact that the Dogs handled their business in such a workmanlike fashion this weekend, I think this is a team that's going to be very, very confident heading up to Knoxville. Will they win? I don't know. Do they have a shot? Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt, especially with the performance the pitching staff put on this weekend. I mean, in combined score throughout the 3 games, it was 18-2. They shut out Clemson in that game. James, your thought on the pitching staff, how key was that for them to get hot, especially going to Knoxville this weekend?
Well, I really think it's all going to be on the pitching staff right here when you look at the Lady Bulldogs. So when you look again for the Vols, which should be a fun rivalry matchup right there, Georgia and Tennessee, the historic rivalry there. But the Volunteers actually lead the SEC in ERA. So when you're looking at that, it's going to really be on the bats to get going and get those pitchers in high-pressure situations early. If you can just keep on. I think Georgia's going to like their chances of getting to them. But you really want the pitching staff to be able to keep up with the elite pitchers on the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in these games, like you're in an absolute pitcher's duel all weekend long. You got to get those small chances in when you get them, and you got to play small ball a little bit. You got to play, just get runs across the board, get a lead, and let your starter in the circle get something going and able to get you to the next round and get you to the next day for a win. All right, baseball, softball wrapping up for college scene at least, but the Braves, I mean, every week, man, we keep talking about how red hot these Braves are, and also GHSA State Series for baseball kickoff this week. We got a couple teams for us four at least that are going to be playing later on this week, and that's all coming up next on The Pit. All right, welcome back into the pit. We got done talking college baseball, college softball, a lot going on there, but we got to talk baseball. The team of Georgia, the Atlanta Braves, just continues to stay hot. Over a quarter way through the season, this team hasn't really slumped yet. Injuries haven't stopped them. Everyone's next up mentality. They beat the Cubs. They beat the Red Sox. Ryan, what have you thought of the Braves this past week and leading into this NL East week that they got coming up, going to the Fish and then back for the Nationals?
Guys, at this point, we just need to tape one segment, and we just need to play it every single week, because I feel like it's the same thing every week with the Atlanta Braves. It's this team's going to slump eventually, right? This is eventually going to go down, right? And it just never does. And I think the Cubs series in particular is very, very impressive to me. It's a big emotional series. We didn't get a chance to talk about it a lot last week, but you're coming back home for the first time since the passing of Ted Turner, since the passing of Bobby Cox, and how perfect it was Superstation versus Superstation, TBS versus WGN back in the day, to have the Braves and the Cubs in that series. The Cubs, I know we talked about it last week, for only the first time since 1955 that a team up to this point in the season had two winning streaks of 9 games or more. That was a really, really good team. Everybody's talking about the Cubbies right now. Everybody knows what Pete Crow Armstrong can do. For the Cubs to go out and take care of or for the Braves to go out and take care of that business and then take care of it against the Red Sox. And I get it. The Red Sox are struggling right now. This is not a great team in Boston. But it's just the workmanlike approach. It's in, it's out. There you see Drake Baldwin up there, 4 homers in 6 games. He has stayed absolutely sensational. The rotation's really good. And then, as you see on the graphic there, the Marlins road trip. I get the Fish have cooled off, but this is still a team that can be a little pesky. I'm excited to see what you can do this week if you're Atlanta, because if you can make up a lot more ground and get kind of these wins that count as more than a win when you're winning in division, if you can do that against the Fish and you can do it against the Nats, at some point this lead's just going to be insurmountable, because we keep saying the dip's going to happen, the dip's going to happen, the dip's going to happen. Is it? Is it? I mean, I don't know.
That's a good point, Ryan. I mean, it is a very long season. You know, teams have not dipped before. We've seen before with 98 Yankees and those great Seattle teams back in the early 2000s where everyone kept saying, well, you know, they'll fall off, but they just don't. And, you know, this is a Braves team that, you know, they're going to have to hit the deadline at some point and pick up some arms and pick up some outfield depth, especially with the injuries that they have. But you've been really impressed. Mike Yastrzemski was huge this week. I don't know what it was. That play he made in L.A. has just given that guy all the confidence in the world. Hit that big walk-off on Friday night against the Red Sox. Joe, talk about the importance of the Cubs series. I mean, that was kind of like a playoff matchup in that first, maybe an NLDS kind of preview, and to be able to get that series win, especially at home, was big.
Yeah, to be able to have the 2 best teams in the National League go at it, and obviously the Braves getting the home field advantage, I think went a little bit farther than most people realize at Truist Park. It's been crazy this year. The Braves have been outstanding at home and on the road, but at home they have been incredible. We've seen some magical moments so far this season, but beating the Cubs, absolutely just a momentum builder. 2-1 on the series. Could have been a sweep had we gotten lucky, but we'll take a 2-1 series win. That was their 12th of the season. Red Sox this past weekend, 13th of the season. I don't know what the numbers are and what the overall stats are across the MLB, because the league has been around for so much longer than all of us have been alive combined. But if you look at the Braves right now, 32-15, 13 series wins, 1 loss, 1 series split. That has got to be somewhat close to an MLB record, if not an MLB record, for how good a team has started through 15 series to begin a season. And guys, 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, when we were getting into the start of spring training, had you told me that right now, over a quarter of the way through the regular season, that the Atlanta Braves would be 32-15 with the way that they've won some of these baseball games. I would have called you cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because this team looks unrecognizable from what we have seen the last 2 years out of Atlanta. And Ryan, you just talked about it, being able to pick up series wins against divisional opponents this coming week against the Marlins and then the Nationals. Those are going to go a long way, because the Phillies, we saw it at the beginning of the season, they were struggling along with most of the NL East. They fired their manager. Now the Phillies have started to gain some ground. They're still a long way off of what the Braves are doing, but to be able to get divisional wins is going to go a long way for the rest of the season. So the Braves continue to stay red hot. Don't see the train slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Building
8 games
that
back,
lead
to be
in the
precise.
division. No, go ahead, Ryan.
No, just 8 games back, to be precise, as far as the Phillies go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough to keep talented teams like that, the Mets and the Phillies, down for as long as they've been, because they're eventually going to hit some hot streaks, and you want to have that sustained lead, especially with those bottom teams like the Fish and the Nationals, to get ahead of them while you can when it comes down to those later parts of the season. Bryce Elder was phenomenal on Saturday until he wasn't. Left him into that 8th inning, and it ended up blowing the game. But what have you thought of this pitching rotation? Another strong week for them, and Grant Holmes was very strong on Sunday. And moving forward with this rotation, especially with the injuries they had leading into the year.
Right. Well, you just mentioned it right there. So many injuries to this rotation coming into the year that the starting rotation was honest. Outside of Chris Sale was the biggest question mark for the Atlanta Braves going into this year. And I really think the Bryce Elder improvement has really saved this rotation a lot. I mean, we were seeing it. Bryce Elder was honestly a few bad starts away last year from getting DFA'd. He had like a 5 ERA, I believe, last year. This year, he has looked like a completely different pitcher. That offseason workouts he did with Greg Maddux, one of the best pitchers of all time, the greatest in Atlanta baseball history, in my opinion, really, really helped him out there. But also, let's not forget, Spencer Strider coming back, being healthy, has really helped out this rotation a lot. Grant Holmes putting together quality starts has really helped. And so we've seen Ronaldo Lopez have to move to the bullpen. J.R. Ritchie has come up, and he's making a name for himself in this big league rotation. So really, it really has been the next guys kind of stepping up for this starting rotation. But like you mentioned earlier, Joe, this team feels completely different from what we've seen over the last 2 years. And as much as we all love Brian Snitker, I really do got to credit that to Walt Weiss for changing the energy. He tackled Jorge Soler. I really think that fired the guys up here for the Atlanta Braves. So I think the energy is different surrounding this clubhouse. I think you got to give a huge credit to Walt Weiss there and the new energy he's been able to bring in. The pitching staff is honestly all stepped up with Bryce Elder improving, J.R. Ritchie coming up, making a name for himself, Fuentes coming in, helping in the bullpen. Hopefully we start seeing him get some more starting opportunities coming there. But I think if you're the Atlanta Braves, from where this starting rotation was at opening day, all the question marks surrounded it, if you told us we were sitting at 32-15 with that starting rotation, I think you'd take that all day, every day. And the fact that this rotation has stepped up with the way they have, with all the injury concerns, with the question marks, it's just a testament to how good this Atlanta Braves coaching staff is.
Absolutely. I feel like we're beating an old drum at this point, but the Braves are red hot, and they're going to stay doing that until, the inevitable slump happens. But we keep saying it's going to happen. We just don't know when or if it will happen at all. But hey, we're staying on the diamond. High school baseball in the state of Georgia, GHSA State Championship Series coming up this week. ECI versus Lanier, 1A Division II. Joe, that's up in your region with ECI. Quick thoughts on ECI and heading to the state game this week.
Yeah, I think they've got a good chance to get some revenge last year from the playoffs. I would be lying right now, Drew, if I said I knew too much about them, because they are pretty distant from Augusta here, about an hour and 45 minutes down the road south. But getting to play in Statesboro this Friday, we're looking forward to it. I'm sure our crew is going to be down there covering that series on Friday. If it goes to 3, I believe they'll play the game 3 on Saturday. But Lanier County, a very worthy opponent. They've had a stellar season. I believe they're 30-4 on the season so far. So ECI's got their hands full if they want to be able to bring home a state title. Yeah, absolutely. And then Troup County and Pickens, that's Troup County's up in LaGrange, Georgia, where that is right in RDMA. And lucky enough, we were pretty excited because Pickens is just real north Georgia, and we were thinking, hey, that game's going to be in Rome. No, it's going to be right here in Columbus, Georgia. So we're pretty psyched about that. We don't have to be driving up to Rome this weekend. But Troup County hosted Pickens. Troup, reigning
3A champs, looking to go back-to-back. Really talented team. Chase Mosley, Georgia Southern commit at shortstop. Davis Munkus, he's got a ton of Big 12 SEC interest. He's a power arm, and he's also a great right fielder. Left fielder Garrison Edwards, their starting quarterback for the team. He's going to Navy to play QB, but he's also a terrific bat and great left fielder. And Troup County's got a ton of pitching depth. Tanner Glisson, one of the best coaches in the state. That's my guy. He also coaches the football team. They won their series on Thursday night, and then they went up immediately to Atlanta on Friday to go play their spring game. So credit to the Troup County Tigers to try to bring a back-to-back state title to LaGrange, Georgia, and try to all bring it back around. But hey, that's enough. We're running out of time here for another episode of The Pit. Join us back here next week for your Georgia Regional Sports Show.